If someone told you there was a kingdom in the Philippines so wealthy and powerful that it sent official ambassadors to the most powerful empire in the world, would you believe them? If someone told you that Filipino kings, with palaces, royal courts, and naval fleets, were negotiating with the Chinese emperor as equals, would you believe them? If someone told you this kingdom produced gold so refined and technically sophisticated that modern jewelers have sat before these pieces and admitted they do not fully understand how they were made, would you believe them? Because every word of that is true. And here is what should make you angry. You were never taught this in school. Most history channels still are not telling the complete story. Until today. Today I am taking you deep into the story of Butuan, the hidden golden kingdom of the Philippines. A civilization so powerful it rewrites everything we thought we knew about ancient Southeast Asia. And before this video ends, I will bring you face to face with the greatest unsolved mystery in Philippine archaeology. A question obsessing researchers for 50 years. A question still not fully answered. Where is the palace? Stay with me. This is the story they buried, and it is time the world finally heard it. Part 1. The morning that changed everything. It was a hot afternoon in 1976 in Butuan, Agusan del Norte. A group of construction workers digging near the Agusan River hit something solid in the soft riverbed mud. Ancient wooden planks, thick, dark, perfectly preserved by the oxygen-deprived soil that had protected them for over 1,000 years. Archaeologists arrived. What they uncovered over the following days, weeks, and decades would permanently change Philippine history. It was a Balangay, a plank-built vessel of sophisticated design, its planks stitched together with cord in a construction technique representing centuries of refined maritime engineering. Carbon dated to 320 AD, over 1,200 years before the Spanish arrived, it was immediately recognized as the oldest wooden watercraft ever excavated in Southeast Asia. But as excavations spread, more boats appeared, 10 balangay in total. An entire ancient fleet preserved beneath the riverbed, each vessel a time capsule from a civilization almost entirely forgotten. Surrounding those boats, Chinese trade ceramics from the 10th century, their glazes still brilliant after 1,000 years underground. Glass beads from Indian workshops, bronze religious bells, iron weapons, and gold objects so numerous and so technically extraordinary that their presence in this single location shattered every assumption about pre-colonial Mindanao. Stop and think about what this is telling you. You do not anchor 10 large trading vessels in one river by accident. You do not concentrate Chinese imperial ceramics, Indian glass, and extraordinary local gold work in one location by coincidence. This is the physical signature of a major international trading port, a city actively connected to the wider ancient world, doing business with China, India, and the Arab world for generations before anyone wrote it down. And if that is the city, then what was the kingdom behind it? What ruler commanded this fleet? What civilization produced this gold? That question changed everything. The answer is far more extraordinary than the discovery itself. Part 2. The Maritime Empire at the Edge of the World. Butuan was not a riverside village or a provincial port. Butuan was a maritime empire, and at its peak during the 10th and 11th centuries, one of the most strategically positioned kingdoms in Southeast Asia. Sitting on the northeastern coast of Mindanao, Butuan controlled sea lanes connecting the Philippine archipelago to the broader Asian maritime trade network. Ships from China passed through its waters. Vessels heading to the Spice Islands stopped at its ports. Merchants from Java, Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula, and the Indian Ocean world all knew Butuan. All had reason to do business there because Butuan had gold. Not just raw gold, though Mindanao's mineral wealth was extraordinary. What Butuan had was mastery, a goldsmithing tradition of such refinement and accumulated excellence that its products were in a category entirely their own. Filigree so fine it looks drawn rather than constructed. Repoussé work hammered from behind to raise intricate designs that challenge trained modern craftsmen. Granulation, the fusing of tiny gold spheres to a surface without visible solder, executed so perfectly that individual granules are sometimes invisible to the naked eye. These were not the products of a primitive culture. They were the products of a civilization perfecting its craft for centuries, absorbing influences from Hindu-Buddhist traditions, from India and Java, from Chinese decorative vocabularies, from the earliest Philippine metalworking, and synthesizing all of it into something unmistakably its own. But gold was only part of what made Butuan extraordinary. What truly set it apart was this: it translated that wealth into political power, into diplomatic standing, into a place at the table of the most powerful civilization in the medieval world. The proof sits in the imperial archives of China, preserved in records over 1,000 years old. Part 3. The Filipino king who sat with emperors. Picture the year 1001 AD. The Sung dynasty of China at the absolute apex of its power, their capital Kaifeng home to over 1 million people when most European cities hold fewer than 50,000. Their navy controls the sea lanes of Asia. Their silk, porcelain, philosophy, and art are the gold standard of medieval civilization. Every kingdom in Asia knows that to be recognized by China is to matter. To send tribute and receive gifts in return is to be acknowledged as a legitimate sovereign power. And in 1001 AD, a diplomatic mission from the Philippines walked through the gates of the Sung imperial court. This is not mythology, not oral tradition. This is documented word for word in the official annals of the Sung dynasty, maintained by imperial historians whose entire purpose was to record which kingdoms the empire engaged as peers. The king of Butuan, a ruler the Chinese records name as Kiling, sent official representatives to the emperor. They brought tribute, received gifts in return. The Sung dynasty formally recorded Butuan as a sovereign state, with the standing to engage the most powerful empire in the world as an equal, a Filipino king, conducting international diplomacy with China as a peer. 1,000 years ago, the Chinese did not acknowledge everyone. The fact that Butuan merited formal recorded recognition tells you everything about the scale of this kingdom. And then in 1003 AD, 2 years later, the records show another Butuan mission arriving in China. This was not a one-time gesture. This was a Philippine kingdom running a sustained foreign policy. But those diplomatic records cannot capture what the gold truly meant. In the pre-colonial worldview of the Philippines, gold was spiritually charged, connecting the living to the dead, the human to the divine, placed on the honored dead to ease their passage into the spirit world, worn as protection, identity, cosmic declaration. The gold Kiling sent to the emperor was not a payment. It was a statement, about who Butuan was, about the power it carried, and to understand that gold, you need to see what the goldsmiths of Butuan were actually capable of creating. Part 4. The Gold That Defies Explanation. In 1917, nearly 60 years before the Balangay discovery, a woman washing clothes in the Agusan River felt something heavy in the mud beneath the water. She pulled it free. A golden figure of a woman, seated in a posture of power, wearing an elaborate crown, adorned head to foot in jewelry of astonishing detail. 8 inches tall, nearly 4 pounds of solid gold, its eyes set with stones, its details so precise that modern archaeologists have struggled to explain how it was made without modern tools. This is the Agusan Image, and it remains, over a century after its discovery, one of the most remarkable objects ever found in Southeast Asia. The figure combines Philippine artistic elements with unmistakable Hindu-Buddhist iconographic influences, the posture, crown, and jewelry drawing from the same vocabulary that produced Java's great temple sculptures. But it is not a copy, it is a transformation, something distinctly Butuan, created by an artist who absorbed the wider world of Asian art and made something that could only have come from the Philippines. The Agusan Image is extraordinary. But it is not alone. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas holds hundreds of pre-colonial gold artifacts, many stylistically connected to the Butuan tradition. Earrings of filigree so intricate, individual wires measure fractions of a millimeter. Ceremonial belts that have left modern craftspeople genuinely puzzled. Death masks, hammered gold sheets covering the faces of the honored dead. Kinari figures, half human and half bird. Ritual containers whose repoussé surfaces function almost as visual texts. Records of a spiritual world carried in gold. The metallurgists who studied these pieces say the techniques required generational transmission, not a craft any individual could master alone, a living tradition passed from master to student, refined over centuries, possibly millennia. The goldsmiths of Butuan were keepers of sacred knowledge, transforming raw metal into objects of spiritual weight, political meaning, and artistic power. If this is what Butuan's craftspeople could create, imagine the palace that commissioned them. Imagine the court that displayed this work. Imagine the king at its center. Where is that palace? Part 5. The greatest unsolved mystery in Philippine history. This is the question that has kept Philippine archaeologists awake for 50 years. The evidence for Butuan's power is overwhelming. The boats are real. The gold is real. The Chinese imperial records are real. By every archaeological measure, Butuan was one of the most significant kingdoms in medieval Southeast Asia. And yet the physical center of that kingdom, the royal palace, the seat of King Kiling's power, has never been definitively found. Why? The first answer is the materials. The great palaces of Southeast Asian civilization were not stone like European castles. They were wood, bamboo, rattan, and nipa palm, organic materials suited to tropical climates but incapable of surviving 1,000 years of rain, flooding, and biological decomposition. The palace of King Kiling was almost certainly an elevated wooden structure of remarkable size, but built from materials that could not outlast the jungle. The second answer is the jungle itself. The Philippines is one of the most biologically active environments on Earth. Wood rots within decades without the specific preservation conditions that saved the Balangay boats. A wooden palace above the waterline would have been consumed within a century or two of abandonment. But the third answer, the crucial one, is not that the evidence is gone. It is that the evidence is buried. Post holes left by massive wooden columns have been identified at multiple locations near Butuan. Artifact concentrations cluster in areas aligning with historical descriptions of the royal centre. Soil chemistry anomalies suggest cultural deposits at depths not yet excavated, and ground-penetrating radar surveys have returned results generating genuine excitement. Subsurface anomalies consistent with buried foundations and structural remains, identified beneath the streets and buildings of the modern city. The palace is not gone, not destroyed. It is beneath us, buried under 2,000 years of soil, flood, and urban development, waiting for the moment when technology, funding, and expertise align to bring it back to light. And when that day comes, it will be one of the most significant moments in the history of Southeast Asian archaeology. Part 6. The civilization they tried to erase. Butuan is one thread, the most brilliantly golden thread, in a larger tapestry of pre-colonial Philippine civilization systematically suppressed by 3 centuries of Spanish colonial rule. For generations, one narrative dominated, that before Spain arrived in 1565, the Philippines was a scattered collection of primitive, unconnected tribal communities without cities, kingdoms, writing, or international connections. That Spain brought civilization to these islands. That narrative was constructed deliberately. It served the colonial project. If the people you colonize had no civilization before you arrived, your arrival becomes benevolence rather than conquest. If they had no kingdoms, dismantling their political structures seems justified. If they had no history, the history begins with you. But the archaeology does not lie. The kingdom of Tondo in what is now Manila maintained formal trade relations with China from at least the 900s AD. Its elite were literate, its merchants wealthy, its connections stretched across maritime Southeast Asia. The Sultanate of Sulu, by the 15th century, controlled trade routes across the southern seas and maintained diplomatic relations with kingdoms from Java to Borneo to the Malay Peninsula. The Visayan polities had their own script, the Baybayin, their own sophisticated legal traditions and social hierarchies of remarkable complexity. And the Laguna copper plate inscription, the oldest known written document found in the Philippines, dated 900 AD, is inscribed in a sophisticated mixture of Old Malay, Old Javanese, and Old Tagalog. Its content, a legal record. The formal pardon of a nobleman's son from a debt. Routine administrative paperwork from a civilization with law, writing, and official hierarchies. This is not what primitive societies do. This is what civilizations do. The Philippines before Spain was not a blank page. It was a fully written book, rich, complex, internationally connected, and extraordinarily creative. Spain did not bring civilization to these islands. Spain burned the library. Part 7. The gold that left and never came back. This part of the story deserved to be said plainly. A significant portion of Butuan's archaeological heritage is no longer in the Philippines. In the years following the 1976 discoveries, as the scale and richness of the site became known, artifacts began to leave. Some departed illegally, looted from excavation sites before they could be properly documented, sold through the shadows of the international antiquities trade. Others left through legal gaps that failed to protect Philippine cultural heritage. A gold earring from Butuan sitting in a private collection in Europe, is a beautiful object. In the Philippines, connected to its river and its people, it is evidence of a civilization struggling for a century to be seen, to be recognized, to take its rightful place in the global narrative of human achievement. Every artifact that leaves is a page torn from that story, a gap that may never be filled. This is not unique to the Philippines. Sites from Iraq to Cambodia to Egypt have suffered the same violation. But it is particularly damaging here because Butuan is already so poorly known in the global historical consciousness that every loss is disproportionate. The artifacts that remain, in the National Museum of the Philippines, in the Bangko Central Gold Collection, are extraordinary, enough to tell the story, but they are not everything that existed, and what is gone may be gone forever. JDCRC conclusion: the kingdom that waits. The excavations at Butuan continue today. Researchers are still digging into Mindanao's soil, running radar surveys, analyzing artifacts, reading faint signals the earth sends through centuries of sediment. They are building the complete portrait of a kingdom that by any honest measure was one of the most remarkable polities in the medieval world. A kingdom sitting at the intersection of the great Asian maritime trade networks. A kingdom that translated wealth into gold the ancient world recognized as extraordinary. A kingdom that claimed a seat at the diplomatic table of the most powerful empire on earth. And beneath the streets and shops of modern Butuan, the palace of King Kiling is waiting. It was not burned, not destroyed, not swept away. It simply sank, slowly, decade by decade, beneath the accumulating layers of soil and time and history, until the jungle covered it completely and the world above moved on without knowing what lay beneath. But the archaeologists know it is there. The radar data suggests it. The artifact patterns point toward it. The historical records describe it. And the gold, the extraordinary, breathtaking gold of Butuan, is the proof that something worth finding is still down there, waiting with the patience of centuries. That day is coming. When it arrives, when the first footage from inside the royal quarter of ancient Butuan reaches the world, an entire civilization will step out of the shadows of forgotten history and take its rightful place in the story of human achievement. The jungle kept the secret for 2,000 years. The archaeologists are taking it back. And now, you know. Before you go, tell me in comments. Question 1. If you are Filipino, how does it feel knowing your ancestors were conducting international diplomacy with the Chinese Empire 1,000 years ago? That they built a kingdom recorded by imperial historians on the other side of the world? Question 2. If you could be in the room when they finally open the royal palace of Butuan, what one artifact would you most want to see? The throne, the diplomatic records, the gold treasury, the personal seal of King Kiling? Drop your answer below. The most compelling gets featured in my next video. Salamat. See you in the next one.